Hey, this is Mark Moore, aka Tuxedo Mark, at various places on the internet. It just turned 12:36 p.m. according to a computer clock shortly after I hit record on Monday, July 6, 2015. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about Star Trek, and specifically how I would have done things differently at certain points of the franchise. I am currently watching through the Star Trek franchise on Netflix, which I've been doing since last year. Right now I'm in Deep Space Nine Season 3 and Voyager Season 1. I'm coming up to the point shortly where I'll be watching Star Trek Generations. I'm mostly trying to go in Stardate order, or if a Stardate's not available, then using the original air order as a guide. I'm not always successful, but I try to go through it in rough chronological order. I started with the original series, but I was like doing original series alternating with Next Generation, then I just kind of dropped the original series. I don't really like the original series. It's really cheesy. I don't know, there's just something about it. I think it's a few things. The 60s cheesiness, my relative lack of familiarity with the characters, because even though I think my first Star Trek experience might have been Star Trek 4 The Voyage Home, like a TV airing on ABC, I think that might have been it, but I'm not sure. Or maybe it was like the Next Generation episode Relics, which I remember watching because, oh, Scotty, that's some important guy from the original series, right? I'll check this out. Or maybe it was All Good Things, the Star Trek The Next Generation series finale. That might have been... That's one of the earlier episodes that I watched. And I know I watched like TOS on TV in Chicago sometimes when I visited my sister back in the 90s. I don't remember exactly when. Maybe it was 93 also. I'm not sure. I don't remember, but what I remember though, I remember The thing is, I'm more familiar with the Next Generation cast, and even other modern series casts compared to TOS. So I know like the original series is like iconic and the characters are iconic, but they're not iconic to me. So yeah, I just kind of dropped off TOS. And I'm picking it back up every so often. The most recent episode that I watched is The Squire of Gothos. And I'm going in production order with that one. Let's see. I think I also went with production order for TNG Season 1. And I try to go in production order whenever I pick up on that, and whenever it makes sense from a story perspective to do so. But anyway, so I recently started with Star Trek Voyager. I recently finished TNG, went through a short sprint of just DS9, and now I'm into Voyager, alternating with Deep Space Nine. And the most recent episode that I watched, I forget the story title. It's the one with that I watched last night with the people from the other dimension, where when they die, their corpses are sent into our dimension and deposited on an asteroid. Alright, anyway. Oh, Emanations, I think it's called. But anyway, here's my problem. This is where I would have done things differently. With Voyager, first of all, I think it premiered too early. I mean, I know they want to get, like, with the launch of, like, UBN and stuff like that, they want a Star Trek series on there. Okay. I would have given Deep Space Nine more time to be on its own. But I understand they wanted a new Star Trek series for the new network because UPN premiered in January of 1995, and they also they want a show set on a starship again because Deep Space Nine it's set on a station and it's mostly stationary. I mean, I know they add the Defiant, but some people think that that's not the same as going on weekly adventures on a starship, so okay. But here's the thing. This is basically a Lost in Space type of series, Star Trek Voyager. They get stranded 70,000 light years from Earth at maximum warp, like 9.97 or whatever. It would take them 75 years to get home. They get stranded in the Delta Quadrant on the other side of the galaxy. Alright, so that's the premise. And right away, from my initial impressions, I mean, I watched Voyager back in the day, probably mostly, it's like I probably got caught up on previous episodes after the series ended, but I know I watched like the 7 of 9 era, but that's still a while to go. It took me a while to get into Voyager, just like it took me a while to get into Deep Space Nine. I wasn't crazy about it at the beginning. But, you know, when Worf came on and, you know, so, alright, so with Voyager, my immediate impression is it doesn't matter. Most of the episodes seem to not matter at all. It's Planet of the Week stuff, just like TOS and early TNG. And that's another thing that bothers me about TOS. It's Planet of the Week stuff. You know, weekly adventures, show up a planet or whatever, or, you know, problem of the week, and then off we go, and next week it's like, who cares? It didn't matter. I want things to matter. And so far Voyager doesn't seem to matter because they're just trying to get home. They might meet the occasional new alien or new planet, but once they move on, that's it, because they're on a constant trajectory toward Earth. So it's like, it shouldn't matter. They introduced the Kazon in the first episode. The Kazon, kind of a fighting, tough type race. Basically Klingons. The Klingons of the Delta Quadrant. Except they don't have honor, and they're more like a... They were on a desert planet, so they were like desert dwellers or something. The Kazon, once Voyager moves beyond Kazon space, I think... at the end of season 1, or maybe season 2, I think at the end of season 2, then they're pretty much not heard from again after that. No one really liked the Kazon when the series premiered, and I can understand why. There's also the Vidians. I watched that episode of Phage that introduced them. They'll show up again, but again, they're not particularly interesting, and they'll eventually disappear as well. There's, you know, Kess's race, the Ocampa, and Nilix's race, the Talaxians. I mean, who cares? once they move beyond that space, then it's not gonna matter. And that basically sums up at least the first 2 seasons of Voyager. It doesn't matter. What I would have done differently, instead of stranding them in the Delta Quadrant, have them be sent on a long-term mission to chart the Gamma Quadrant. Because, Deep Space Nine's got that wormhole, and near the beginning of Season 3 of DS9, they made communication possible between the Alpha and Gamma Quadrants because they wedged the wormhole slightly open. It's slightly open at all times, so it allows communication. Do that. Send Voyager into the Gamma Quadrant. Long-term mission. There's no star bases. They're far away from Federation space, technically, so you still got the, you can still have some of the long-term making do with what you have premise that Voyager has, but they're not completely isolated from the Federation. They can remain in constant communication. They could get reinforcements if they need it. So they're not totally on their own, but for the most part, on a day-to-day basis, they are on their own. Why wouldn't the Federation send a ship into the Gamma Quadrant to both chart it and investigate the Dominion? There's your premise for Voyager. I think from what I read, the very preliminary concepts for Voyager were developed in 1992, so I don't think they have that Dominion in mind yet. But still, by the time that the series entered production, it really wouldn't have taken too much effort to switch the premise from Delta Quadrant to Gamma Quadrant. I mean, Voyager was at Deep Space Nine at the beginning of the first episode anyway. Go through the wormhole. Don't bother with this Maquis stuff. I mean, if they gotta investigate the Maquis or whatever, okay, fine. Maybe get some Maquis crew members. You could get Tom Paris on board for the mission anyway because whatever, you could change his backstory. It wouldn't have taken too much effort to refit the series to be, exploring the distant Gamma Quadrant. You could still have a little Plan of the Week stuff. Try to stay away from that. Do more Dominion stuff, or fighting the Jem'Hadar, stuff like that. I mean, it surely would have been better than what we got, and it would have allowed more inter-series connectivity with Deep Space Nine. Like a plot could start on Deep Space Nine and finish on Voyager, or start on Voyager and on Deep Space Nine. You could do so much with that. But no. So we got 7 seasons of Voyager trying to get home, which they eventually do, but then we don't even get to see them actually arrive on Earth. Okay. After Voyager, that's the last that we see of the 24th century until Star Trek Nemesis. The following year, but then they did Star Trek Enterprise. It was a prequel series taking place in the 22nd century, 100 years before Kirk, showing the first captain and the first crew and the first trek into the Final Frontier. And who cares? there are absolutely no stakes because everything's gonna turn out okay. Oh, but they threw in the temporal Cold War. Yeah, for like the first 2 or 3 seasons, I think they had a temporal Cold War going on where bad guys in the 22nd century are taking orders from someone in a distant future. There's some kind of war going on in the timeline, and you know what that was? That was an excuse to let Berman and Braga do whatever they want without being held to previously established continuity of what happened in the 22nd century. Yeah, so from the first mission of the Enterprise NX-01, that's not how stuff originally went down. Near the end of Season 4, there was a Mirror Universe episode, and the Defiant, the ship from the original series that disappeared in the Tholian web, apparently it got sent back in time and got sent to the Mirror Universe. And they come across it and they read the files of the crew members from the Enterprise NX-01. Presumably those computer files would have been isolated from the changes in the timeline. Because 1, it was in the past, and 2, it was in another universe. So the only people that we know for sure were on the original Enterprise in the original timeline were Jonathan Archer and Hoshi Sato. That's it. I mean, look at Broken Bow, the pilot episode. They had to launch early because of the Suliban attack, and the Suliban were taking orders from the distant future, and they had to return a Klingon back to Kronos. And first contact with the Klingons came much earlier than it should have. I mean, there was an episode of The Next Generation called First Contact, where Picard said that disastrous first contact with the Klingons led to like a century or two of like animosity between them. That's not how it played out in Broken Bow. Also, Archer's first officer wasn't available, so he had to pick T'Pol. He had to pick Phlox as his doctor because he was there at the time. Hoshi was going to be his communications officer, but he had to bribe her basically to get her on board, to get her to launch earlier. Supposedly Reed and Tucker would have been on board as well. And Mayweather and but yeah, T'Pol and Phlox very likely would not have been on board in the original timeline. Also, remnants of the movie Star Trek First Contact, they encounter the Borg. Of course, right? The Borg that were left over, or whatever, I don't know how they did this, from the movie. The Enterprise NX-01 crew encounters them. Obviously, that didn't originally happen. There's so much stuff that changed. The Sindhi attack on Earth, where they made a huge line of destruction right through Florida. I mean, that didn't originally happen. I liked Enterprise; it was fine, but I wouldn't have done it. What I would have done would have been like, if they had to do the past, like to show the founding of the Federation or show the Earth-Romulan War leading up to that and whatever, do it as a miniseries, like a special event miniseries for the summer. See the dawn of the Federation. Okay, fine, do that, whatever. What I would have done for a replacement series for Voyager, well, first of all, okay, assuming they have the stick with the Delta Quadrant thing with Voyager, after Deep Space Nine ended, bring Voyager home. Yeah, Deep Space Nine ends, and then, let's see, at the end of Season 5 of Voyager, when Deep Space Nine is just ending, bring Voyager home, and have the last 2 seasons carry on what's going on in the Alpha Quadrant in the aftermath of the Dominion War. Maybe Voyager can help play cleanup or whatever. As for a replacement for Voyager, maybe another Starship series or maybe another Space Station series. But if I felt that there was that the 24th century had been sufficiently covered and there wasn't much more to do after the Dominion War, because no one was really in a position to fight anymore after that. Everybody was like beaten down after the Dominion War. I mean, you could do stuff dealing with the occupation of Cardassia or whatever, but assuming nobody's going to be starting anything for a while, then move the timeline ahead. Go forward another 50 or 100 years into the 25th century. Do something there. But yeah, Voyager really was the wrong way to go, and even Enterprise, like the first 2 seasons of Enterprise were mostly like planned of the week type of stuff again. It's like, by that point, with what Deep Space Nine had done with serialized storytelling, I don't think there was any room or any tolerance for plan of the week type stuff again. So, whatever the next Star Trek series would have been if they had decided to go forward instead of backwards, it had to be serialized. It had to do stuff that mattered. I mean, you can have small character stuff too, but put it within the larger canvas of what's going on in the Federation. You know, don't do dippy stuff like, you know, Data experimenting with humor, or the latest time travel episode, or you know, just get away from that stuff. But yeah, that's basically my vision for what I would have done with Star Trek, like from 1995 onward, and I wouldn't have even done the reboot films, like the soft reboots recently. I would have just gone forward into like either pick up with what a lot of the 24th century characters are doing now near the end of the 24th century, or go forward 50 or 100 years into the 25th century. That's what I would have done. You could establish all new characters, and if you don't want to be tied too much to, you know, current continuity, just go forward, put some distance between the new film and what came before. Those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. It's 1 p.m. and that's it. Thanks for watching.